We have a great Browns film breakdown lined up for you on this fantastic Friday. The weather's good. Hopefully you guys are enjoying it. Plug in this podcast. Let's talk Browns camp with somebody who had boots on the ground and plenty of good conversation coming on the latest Browns film breakdown. Welcome in on this beautiful Friday to your Browns film breakdown podcast. We have a close-up of minicamp happening, and when that happens, I like to, as you know, I break down what I see on secondhand videos, what the Browns put out. I try to do the best I can from not being up in Cleveland covering it. And I think we get a lot of information from it, a lot of analysis and a lot of good talking points about what they're doing, how they're doing it, how players are performing. But I think it's also important to take a step back and pull in some information from people who were there. We spent some time with Lance Reisland, who I think does a great job for Cleveland.com, obviously coaching background, various other football endeavors in his life. He knows the game. He thinks about it a very similar way to what I do. And anytime he and I can get together is pretty good chopping of football talk and scheme and what you view from a coaching perspective. So we have him today. It's a great show, a lot to discuss, and I think it's good. A couple house cleaning things to take care of, 30% off through the end of the month. So if you are not with us currently on the website side where you can get the premium podcast every day, you get ad free, obviously, then you get your newsletters, film rooms, all of that great stuff. Check that out. That is obviously worth your time, in my opinion, to get the most out of Browns Film Breakdown, the podcast side. And that's, like I said, for the rest of June, 30% off an annual subscription, a great opportunity to get in a great community of Browns fans, all of that. Listen, unlocks a really great app. There's just too much good stuff to miss out on if you're a fan of this podcast. So come over, check that out, get with us. Nick Chubb's post last night, man, that's really tough. I mean, he loved Cleveland, and it goes back to the article he wrote last year when he was coming back, in the Players Tribune, and matches up with how we have already felt about him and him taking the time to write Cleveland sort of a love letter and talk about, how he grew up in Cleveland, the relationships formed, the city he loves. No bit of that seems phony. I do think he would love to still be in Cleveland. Obviously didn't work out, and this is not abnormal for any, big time running back, highly successful running back. Very few of them, unless they retire early, play with their single team. Go look at the top 20 rushers in NFL history. Not many of them. It's like the Tiki Barber, Barry Sanders world, or way back to Walter Payton types. There's most of the modern guys are going to play for a team or two at the end of their career. And that's how it goes, but it doesn't mean Cleveland loves him any less or he loves Cleveland any less. Clearly he is at the top of universally loved Cleveland athletes of all time. There's some others you can obviously put in that list. Joe Thomas, think Jose Ramirez, Mark Price, but just there's no negative opinion of Nick Chubb. People love him. They love his work ethic, his attitude, the way he goes about his business. And obviously you love just the dynamic football player that he was too. He might still have that in him, and we'll see what shakes out for him in Houston. But there will be a reckoning. There will be a time he comes back to Cleveland. There will be a Ring of Honor ceremony. Hell, who knows? Maybe they retire his number. I don't think it goes that far, but he was very, very good. And I loved every second of watching him. And that love letter to Cleveland on the way out on his Instagram was pretty cool. Pretty cool. Sad, but cool. So we'll miss you, Nick. That's worth your time to check out. Otherwise, it's been pretty quiet at the end of camp. I'm going to talk with Lance here about some of what he saw, a little reference to the video the Browns put out in their meeting room about how they're going about OTAs, minicamp, and then ultimately hitting the ground running in training camp that I think is noteworthy. So plenty of great stuff. We talk about the quarterbacks. We talk about the structure of 7-on-7, Skellies, what they're doing with the quarterback rotation, and our opinion about getting guys reps. There's just so much good stuff in here. And then, players who are standing out to him and how the defense is shaping up with schematic coverages and where Carson Schlesinger, some of the young guys are fitting in, how the secondary is moving, shaking, year 3 in a system. Great stuff all around. You're going to enjoy this one. Let's get over that chat with Lance after a quick word from our sponsor. Okay, welcome Lance into the show, and I got a big question for you right off the bat, man. I know you've got extensive coaching experience. You've been put in some spots where you got to make tough choices. So I'm going to say, hey, you got a senior quarterback who's okay, is not anything too special, but a good leader, well-respected, Lance. You got, let's call him a sophomore who's had some moments, and then you got 2 freshmen who are pretty interesting that you want to see. How are you navigating that over the summer? Because, obviously what I'm getting at is, do you think the Browns are navigating this rare, very rare 4 quarterback situation the best way. And I kind of layer this because they're doing the unique split field stuff, which is not very common at that level. Now, more high school stuff, more college stuff at times when there's more of a broad quarterback battle, you're trying to get a lot of looks at it. But, this situation is very unique to get 4 guys enough opportunities. And how do you think they've navigated that through OTAs and minicamp, man?
Well, I'll tell you what, I've actually been fairly impressed with how they've done it. The split field stuff is going very well, in my opinion. And like you said, I haven't seen it very much. It's kind of the stuff we used to do, right? They're even doing that up front with their half line stuff, with that weak side zone, that wide zone. So they're doing lots of stuff trying to create maximum reps for all these guys. Now, a couple things that my dad always taught me is that, I think what they're doing, in my opinion, because as you know, nothing really means anything till those pads go on. And that's kind of the telling point. But as my dad always taught me, which I always taught my quarterbacks, is unless the quarterbacks know exactly what they're doing, it's not a fair fight, right? Because they're not able to play at top speed. They're not able to go through the processing like they should, things like that. So some of the throws that have been bad, in my opinion, have been because they've been late, right? And hopefully that gets kind of shored up as they learn the system. But for me, as a coach, there's 2 things. At the NFL level, it's different. However, I think Kevin Stefanski's number one goal is who's going to help me win games. Now, if he gets the call above him to say, hey, I want to see these guys, that's great. But if you play guys that aren't ready to go, then you're not the coach the next year, right? And we all know the NFL is very fickle with that, and how the coaches don't last, and they don't get a ton of time to build, and obviously coming off a year they had. So I guess my overall answer to that, Jake, would be, who – I think they're doing a good job, and you got to find the guy who is going to allow you to win. And for me right now, that's Flacco, and not for any other reason, just because Flacco allows his teammates to play fast, right? So as you know, they don't have to go through with Flacco, they don't necessarily have to go through the installation in the meetings, right? So you go through the playbook, and then you go through the walkthroughs. And then I tell everybody the key with guys who understand the system, it's not knowing the plays, it's knowing how the defense reacts, right? So you have a play on paper that you love, and you expect it to be against one coverage or one front or whatever it is, and then the defense adjusts, and then you have to adjust, right? So Flacco's seen all those adjustments, and I think early on he gives them the best chance to win. I also think they're doing a good job of getting all 4 of these guys up to speed. And then because they know it, now they can play at full speed. And then you kind of let the cards play out as they will through preseason. Now, I've seen in practice, everything seems to be a little bit more important. Every rep seems to be a little bit more important. There seems to be a little bit more competitive edge out there in practice, which is good because there's positions to be fought for. But as a coach, I'm going to play the best guy. And a lot of people say that, but you chart everything, you see everything. Who allows your team to win, and who allows your teammates as a quarterback, who allows them to play at full speed, right? And allows them to, I always tell people balance is not about, 50-50 run pass. Balance is about doing what you want to do when you want to do it. So for me, that's Joe Flacco right now, just because of that experience. Very impressed with his arm talent. I've been impressed with Sanders. I think he's improved his footwork a ton. Dylan Gabriel's been a guy I've always been high on. Now he is an outlier because he is small. So if he's successful, it's going to be, outside the norm. And then Kenny Pickett can do a bunch of things from different launch points and things like that. But for me, when people ask me who the quarterback is, I think they're doing a good job of getting everybody up to speed, and then you let it play out with live bullets, knowing that everybody knows where they're going with the ball, everybody understands the concepts, and you go from there.
Yeah, I think at this point, and not just because Joe was here in 23, it obviously helps as they're kind of inverting back to more of what Kevin's done, but I'm sure the verbiage is much the same to what he's accustomed to. But like to the general point of Kenny coming into a new place and the 2 rookies coming into the NFL, if Joe wasn't ahead substantially at this point, that would be a pretty big concern, right? So I think it makes a ton of logical sense. A couple things I want to hit on that you just pointed out that are perfectly stated. If you are a quarterback coming up to the line or even in the huddle, right? You're maybe struggling getting the verbiage through the radio call from the OC, or Kevin's giving it from the sideline, but it's still coming into your helmet, and you're struggling to get the verbiage out in the huddle, or you're struggling to kind of know where if you don't, let me put it this way. When I was playing, and I'm sure you can back this up a little bit, but like if I'm thinking too much about what we're doing as I'm breaking the huddle, this is dead. Like you got to have your mind, you got to know that so well that you're looking at everything but what you guys are doing, because you know it's second nature where routes are going, what protection looks like, and you got to be on the defense indicators nonstop, pre and post snap. I got to know where they like to go pre-snap to disguise where they're going here. If they roll down that slot, they typically like to do this. There's just like, if there's too much of that, thinking about, well, what are our guys running? Okay, we're running this backside concept. Okay, yeah, he's running a square in. That's a tough spot to be in. So to your point, Lance, it feels like the whole idea of OTAs and minicamp for them is reps for everybody, even if it means Joe's taking a day with less, maybe none, and then fewer than the others, because we don't think Joe has to think. We know once we hit training camp, which Kevin was in the video yesterday, the Browns released, like, hey man, training camps, we're going. It's day one, boom, out the gate. It feels like that's a different vibe in terms of like, we're not doing anything other than like work nonstop. Like, it just felt they've kind of eased into something, like they want to get going because they know they got a lot to decide. But to your point, it's like we need these three other guys to get a ton of reps, as many as we can maximize, so that when we're making that tougher decision at the early portions of training camp about, hey, it's clear this guy's not quite where we know where we want him to be, we don't prefer his style, et cetera, for whatever reason, it's not because they didn't know the playbook, and it's not because they didn't get live bullets in terms of like opportunities to feel it out. You know what I'm saying? I feel like that is a lot of the thought process, like what we saw here. And I know everybody wants to track the completions and attempts and touchdowns, interceptions. And I've talked too much on this pod about the negatives of that. But like what I'm getting at is they're just trying to get an equal share right this moment so that training camp gets here and you're ready to like, hey, Shador, or hey, Dylan, or hey, Kenny, you're not getting this opportunity and squandering it because the mental side's not right, or you didn't get a chance to see how all this feels. Because I'm again, and I'm throwing this back to you, but like it would be a real bummer to get to training camp and you're like, man, Shador really does these 5 things we really like. We really like him, but he's just not quite there mentally yet. He just doesn't quite have the processing of the playbook down. He doesn't quite know the indicators. I'm not saying that's the case. I'm just saying it would be a bummer for them to look back and be like, boy, we should have given him some more mental reps and some more opportunities at OTAs, or the same for Dylan, and we didn't do that. So I feel like that has been the biggest thing they've been trying to do. Correct me if you think I'm wrong on that.
No, I think you're spot on with that. And like you said, I think that's a great, not only for quarterbacks, but for all positions. And again, I always refer back to my dad because my dad had a lot of these things that really stuck with me as a coach. But the minute the minute you're thinking and the minute your head is working, when you come up the line of scrimmage in live action, your feet aren't moving. And so to your point, everything has to be reactionary. Everything has to be, you can't be thinking about your footwork because I'm underneath center now and we're running wide zone and I got to get my hips around. Those things all have to be generally like known, right? And they're doing a good job of not only the processing, but the footwork and how they expect them to throw and what all those things that we all talk about and launch points and all that kind of stuff. Like those things have to be second nature. And, like you said, pre-snap routine, is it safeties, the flat defenders, the blitz, however it is, there's lots of different ways to do things. But there has to be that pre-post snap processing, and you have to do it at such a high level, even at the NFL level, when those starters are in, those starting secondaries or guys are in, those windows are so much more tight, and they're tight with the third and fourth guys in. Remember, the third and fourth guys are guys that are the best guys you've ever seen, and they're not the starters for a reason because the Denzel Wards and those guys are so elite in terms of knowing what routes are coming based on depth of drop and all kinds of different stuff. So yeah, I think to go back to your early point, it would be disappointing if Flacco wasn't ahead, and I think he's substantially ahead because of everything you said. And going back to the charting of the plays, Jake, I couldn't agree with you more. I've talked to people ad nauseum in terms of 7-on-7s are useless. No, they're not, but if they're used for what they're for, right? Get the spacing, get lined up, get your landmarks down, get all the stuff that it's meant. It's not meant for anything more than that. Just so you, like you said, to your point, I know where everything's at. I know where all the adjustments at. Now I have to go make a play. But if you're thinking about that, you're not going to make the play. So to your point, I think they've done a great job of getting these guys reps. And like you said, when they hit the ground running in late July, these guys are all ready to go. And they're all ready to go in terms of knowing what I've always said this as a coach. It's not what you can install, it's what you can fix, right? Yeah. And for me, it was, I was always a gap guy. And I put in zone, and I remember being on the board and going, you know what, I'm really good at this. zone stuff. And then all of a sudden you get out there and you're like, all right, well, it looks great on the board, but that's not how football works, right? You got to be able to fix stuff. So and the only way you can fix stuff is if you know how it works. So these quarterbacks, to fix their mistakes, they have to know what the concepts are, the high lows, the ins outs. There's tons of doing football, but basically it's high low, it's in and out, it's crossers, it's stuff that they window dress a lot, but you have to know where all that is so quick and process it so quickly. I think they're doing a good job of giving them a chance, giving them a seat at the table. Doesn't mean you get to eat, but you're going to get a seat at the table because you understand the entire system.
If you're on the regular podcast feed or the YouTube channel, that is where today's pod ends. If you want to hear more of the in-depth conversation with Lance, come over to brownsfilmbreakdown.com, unlock every single day with a full podcast ad-free. You also get the newsletters and film rooms that make this website unique and awesome and enhances your Browns experience. Reminder, 30% promo going off the rest of the month. To get that annual subscription, lock yourself into the 2025 season and then the all-important 26 free agency and draft cycles. Take advantage of that 30% off offer. Unlock all these podcasts in their entirety every single day. brownsfilmbreakdown.com. You can find a link to that direct sale going on our website at the description of this show, either on, again, your podcast platform or YouTube platform. Thanks for being here. Come over and unlock the rest of the show with some great insights from Lance. And as we always say, go Browns.